Hello, my name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to This Is Metal. And as usual, my co-host is Joe Lawson. And today, me and Joe decided we're going to do a special tribute to the late, great Cliff Burton, the original bass player from Metallica. Because coming up next week is on the 27th of September will be the 34th anniversary of his death. And so we're going to look back on the late, great Cliff Burton. Before we get into that, Joe, you had a few things on your mind you wanted to talk about. And first of all, we want to make people aware of it. If they go to www.cataclysm.com, there's a new Joe Lawson Scream King song. So you want to tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah. If you check out, like Jason was saying, on Cataclysm website, we got a song previewed on there from the new Scream King album. The song's called Trail of Death, and it features James Rivera of Hellstar, myself, and Tim Ripper Owens. It's a great, just straight ahead, ass-kicking song, and it's good metal. Check it out if you get a chance. And that will be available in 2021. We're in the midst of negotiating a recording contract actually with a label now on that. So hopefully we'll have some news reports to report on the actual release date, but it will be in 2021 on the Indomitable Spirit album.
And let the fans here know, Joe, all the Joe Lawson fans out there, where can they go to find out all about you and your bands if they want?
Well, as far as Scream King goes, we're on Facebook. We also have our own website, screamkingofficial.com. So you can go on there and get CDs and merchandise and stuff that we have there. And Dragon Lore, we're mainly just on Facebook. We don't have an official site there yet. And also the Iron Shield Records, or Pure Steel Records, also have all of our information on their sites, and the album is available through them. And we're working on another record for that band as well. And
we should probably let people know, too, that listen to This Is Metal, that there's also like a Dragon Lore fan page, I believe one for Scream Kings, too. And a lot of times we go to the Dragon Lore fan page, and we post stuff about This Is Metal, and people check it out, and they comment on their thoughts. So that's another place you could go and comment about This Is Metal, or if you're a Joe Lawson fan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We have everything to do with This Is Metal on there, and more. So
and then all the bands that you just mentioned. And Joe also wants to let y'all know about a fundraiser he's got going on. So why don't you tell people about that, Joe?
Yeah, it's on GoFundMe. My daughter Serena and her fiance had a baby recently, so they got a newborn baby.
My grandpa.
And, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Preston, her fiance, was involved in a horrible car wreck. He hit a deer, spun out of control, and went head on into a tree.
Wow.
And did some damage, fractured his femur bone, and did some damage to his legs. So he's going to be out of work for a while, and going through physical therapy and stuff like that. So. And they're without a vehicle now, so and they're young and a new family. So if you get a chance, those are on my personal Facebook and my Scream King Facebook page. I have that posted on there, and I try and get that out to people. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask me or ask them on the GoFundMe page. So
so just people interested out there who might want to be interested in knowing, did anybody get seriously hurt? I mean, you said he's got to do physical therapy and all, but I guess
thank God it's not a life-threatening injury or anything. But it's gonna be a long recovery. As you know, fractures take longer to heal than breaks, and the femur bone's a tough one. So
and I'm sure running over
took him out of commission for a while.
I'm sure running over deer probably got most of the damage, but still, thank God everybody's all right.
Yeah. My daughter and the baby wasn't in the car. Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah, could you imagine?
So it could have been a lot worse, and we're thankful for that not being worse.
And so, getting right into, like I said, September 27th, going all the way back 34 years ago, 1986, that's when Metallica was involved in that horrible bus accident, which took the life of their bass player, Cliff Burton. Do you remember where you were, Joe, or when you heard the news, that about the bus accident, when you heard the news that, it had taken the life of Cliff Burton?
Well, I was pretty young at the time.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
86, I was like 12, 13 years old. So
Yeah.
I was just getting into music, as a youngster. So I don't recall hearing a lot about it actually when it happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got a little bit older.
Yeah.
And into metal and introduced to metal that I learned who Cliff Burton was and who Metallica was, even for that matter.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story is, when you asked me, like, as far as the era of Metallica we're talking about tonight, what's your favorite album? You go back to those first three albums, and I'd have to say, not necessarily because it's the best album, but I'll tell you, I'd have to say Master of Puppets I would point to, because for a simple fact, like you said, I was a teenager back then, and I do remember, because Metallica, I hadn't heard of a whole lot until 1986, because that's when they got on that tour with Ozzy. That's when you started hearing Metallica every once in a great while, on the radio and stuff. But you're just starting to hear about Metallica. You're just starting to kind of hear a lot about this band.
Right.
And,
for me, same thing.
Yeah.
But to me, it's Master of Puppets and Kill 'Em All.
Yeah.
I love those two Metallica albums. Both of them are my favorite, hands down.
And it's kind of interesting because all three of those albums, of course, feature Kirk Hammett on guitar. But if you go back to the very first Metallica album, even though Dave Mustaine did not play on there, he was involved with some of the songwriting.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and
he wrote a lot of the early riffs for Metallica.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they say that Cliff Burton, Dave, we think of James and Lars as kind of leading Metallica, but they say even though Cliff Burton was an original member, they had a bass player that predated him, Ron McGovern, but he didn't play on any of the albums. He was kind of in the band like during the club days and stuff when they were just playing the club scene. But people forget. We think of Metallica today as a San Francisco band, but they were very much a part of the LA scene back in the early 80s, and so much to the fact that they were competing with bands like Rat and Motley Crue that were really big at the time, and they weren't getting as much love in LA. And it was actually Cliff Burton that encouraged the guys to let's leave LA. We're getting no love in LA. Let's move to San Francisco. I think he was up from Northern California originally, and it was him that kind of got the guys to move to San Francisco.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. I wasn't aware of some of the history on that. Yeah, as far as their migration.
Yeah.
But just to give people an idea of what kind of thumbprint that Cliff Burton still leaves today, there's an Aria Pro 2 Cliff Burton signature bass for $5,200.
Wow. Yeah,
and a lot of people may not know it, but when you start talking to musicians and you start talking to bass players, some of the most influential bass players are probably guys like Steve Harris, Geddy Lee.
Oh yeah.
But Cliff Burton is absolutely in that category when you start talking to metal players, and he has his due respect and due place in metal history, absolutely.
Yeah. What amazes
his signature bass selling for $5,200 kind of speaks about it a little bit there, right there for you.
Yeah, and just to talk about this guy's little lifespan, he was born February 10th, 1962, died September 27th, 1986. So he died at the ripe young age of 24. So we're talking about him, 34 years after he's died. He's actually been dead longer than he was alive. And that's interesting if you stop and think about, like you're saying, Joe, the legacy this guy has left behind. Very much kind of like Randy Rhoads before him. It amazed me that, so many people cite both these guys as like huge influence. Let's start with Randy Rhoads, okay? He was in Quiet Riot like in the late 70s. That was his band. It was a very different sounding band back then, but, as most people know, he didn't record the albums he recorded like with Quiet Riot. You can't get them here in the States. They've been out of print for years. So as far as Randy Rhoads, all anybody knows is those two Ozzy albums he did. They're very they're very huge albums. I mean, let's think if Randy had lived for a minute. I mean, think of all the albums that he'd have in his catalog of music, probably, because he was such a gifted guitar player. But I mean, his talent was just so impressive that with just those 2 albums that he left behind, people still cite him as an influence all these years later. When you talk about Cliff Burton, okay, he recorded maybe 1 more album than Randy Rhoads did, but so he's got 3 albums in his catalog of music. But like you said, people are still, 34 years after his death, citing him as a huge influence, and even the legacy he left on Metallica. Because you forget that when Jason Newsted joined the band, I mean, I've heard that they did everything to kind of really razz the guy, and they were constantly comparing him to, Cliff Burton, as were the fans when he first joined up, with the band.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, the direction that Metallica ended up taking and stuff like that. You got to wonder if Cliff was still at the band. Would that still have happened, or would Cliff have been upset and quit? Or, there's just a lot of questions there that we'll never know.
I mean, when you hear like James and Kirk and even Lars talk about Cliff Burton, they talk about the guy was a great leader. He made a lot of decisions as far as doing what he felt was best for a band. I don't know. I mean, I dare to wonder if, like you said, if Cliff Burton was still alive, would he have made an album like the Black Album, or would he wanted to stay, 100% full blown metal? But I kind of think too, eventually, if you see that's what you have to do to get your songs on the radio or to get a little more money in your bank account, you might be willing to do it. But we just don't know,
Right, yeah. Exactly. A lot of unanswered questions there. I think it's also interesting to point out that his ashes were scattered at sea in the San Francisco Bay.
Wow, yeah. Because I guess
he was cremated.
That's where he spent most of his life, and I guess the fact, like I was saying, that he convinced the guys to all move up to Northern California, where he was from, that he had a real love for that part of the country,
Right.
And Cliff Burton had such an impact too on the even a guy like Dave Mustaine. I mean, yeah, they played in Metallica together for a number of years, but a few years, quite a number of years after he died, and David went on to form Megadeth. I think it was on their 3rd album, So Far So Good So What. He wrote the song "In My Darkest Hour," and it was kind of about him writing about how he reacted to Cliff's death, even though he was no longer Metallica at that point, in 1986. I guess of all the guys in Metallica, that he was like closest to him, and so he kind of poured his feelings for Cliff out in the song "In My Darkest Hour."
Right.
Yeah, and so that's kind of interesting. And of all the guys in Metallica, I guess I mean, you look like a pretty bad guy, I guess, if you did, but talk kind of crap about somebody after they died. But it seems like of all the Metallica guys, Cliff Burton was the one guy that Dave Mustaine never had a harsh word to say about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that also speaks volumes that people thought that highly of him,
Yeah.
And it's sad that when you think about it, because Metallica had just signed their first major label deal with Elektra Records, and they released their first record, and they were on this big tour. Things were just happening for them. That they were just coming into something big,
Yeah.
And the end of the year, tragically, on that tour is when he died.
Yeah, and and a lot of
what I'm getting at is he never got to enjoy some of the success that the rest of Metallica enjoyed.
Yeah, I think sadly, and I'm sure his father would have given it up just to be able to have his son, still alive. But I'm sure his father and some of his family members, they whatever money Cliff should have got, I think he got a piece of that, which rightfully so. But and his father just died recently, maybe like a year or two ago. Cliff Burton's father, he lived to be like 94, and I remember when Metallica, after Robert Trio had joined the band and they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I remember they'd also inducted Cliff Burton, and because of that, they invited his father to come up and stage and join them on stage.
Right. And here's something that I don't know if you're aware of or if anybody's aware of. This is kind of freaky, man. The night that he died, they were kind of arguing about who got to sleep where.
Yeah.
Band members were awakened abruptly, and the bus began to careen from side to side. And they said, Kirk Hammett said, "Fine, take my bunk." He said, "I'll sleep up front. It's probably better anyway."
Yeah, I've heard that. You know, I forgot about that.
That's kind of creepy, man.
I forgot about that, but I mean, you just think about that for a minute. I mean, it could have gone the other way, and it also kind of makes you think about. People say, "Oh, how can you connect the two?" But I'll tell you, like the plane crash from Leonard Skinner, because I had seen an interview with some of the guys, surviving members, you know, years later,
right?
And they were, and one of the guys was talking about, okay, you know, Ronnie Van Zant and Steve Gaines, they were on that side of the plane, and we were on this side of the plane, and it just stopped to think about, okay, you know, how come those guys are the ones that died, and how come we got to live? You know, you kind of have survivor's guilt, and it's kind of, and you think,
sure.
And it gives you like a new perspective. I mean, if you're Kirk Hammett, you think, oh man, you know, man, if I would have just, I would be one dead, and you know, oh my God, why am I still here? Why is he dead? And you got all that to kind of you know, deal with, and I've heard other guys say that you know, the accident happened basically because they were on this icy road. I think it was in Sweden, and and they were like actually the guy driving the bus. They didn't know they're driving on black ice, which anybody who doesn't know, black ice. It's like when the ice is so hard that anything is driving on it. I mean, it will crack, and that's exactly what happened. And the ice started to crack, and I guess the bus eventually.
Well, not only that, at night you can't see it.
Yeah. And the bus eventually flipped, and once the guys realized, you know, they got out and they could see, and morning came. I guess they didn't realize that Cliff had been, you know, was dead for, you know, till morning when they were able to see and stuff. But once they realized, the guys, like James said, he was so freaked out. He's like, you know, it's freezing, snowing in Sweden, and he goes, I'm out in the snow in my freaking underwear, and I'm just so in shock, you know.
Right. Yeah. What a tragic scene that must have been for him. Absolutely.
And that's something I would imagine that it kind of lives with you. I mean, for years and years. I mean, they've had.
Oh, sure. I mean, for years, Ozzy went on many times talking about Randy. You know, about him dying. You know, and the memories or the things that could have been, and
that's
all of that. You know, that probably haunts him, and he thinks about that every day.
And that's kind of a similar scene because I've heard people that were there, like when Randy Rhoads died, they talk about, you know, kind of like same type of thing. Randy and some other person got on the Sharon. I guess Sharon Osbourne, one of her best friends, that was working for her at the time. They were the ones that got on the plane, and these other people said, "No, we don't want to get on the plane. We're gonna go on the bus or whatever." And they actually saw the plane crashing. You know, like, and just how do you live with that? You know, and especially. And especially the guys in Metallica, I mean, you're all on the same tour bus. And then, you know, you can't see nothing at night. You're on the black ice. And then the bus flips over. And when you're able to get everybody else out safe, you realize, you know, one of your best friends and your bandmate, not only is he dead, but the other three, you are, thank God, still alive. And you got that kind of guilt but it doesn't go away because, like I said, okay, I'm sure they still freaked out about it, you know, 34 years later. Maybe they've had some therapy, they had some time. As they say, time heals, you know, most wounds. But, you know, just to kind of be there and to see, I mean, it's kind of like you're saying. Could you imagine, Joe, if you were in that car with your, you know, son-in-law or whatever, and from what you tell us, you know, the car accident was, nobody got seriously hurt, but, you know, that's something that you kind of got to deal with, you know, and it takes a while to get over.
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my brother in a car wreck in 2010, and I think about it all the time.
Oh, wow, yeah. That must have brought you flashbacks, see? And
yeah, absolutely. But going back to Cliff Burton here, though, at his ceremony, Metallica's Orion was played at the ceremony, and lyrics from the song "To Live Is to Die" are engraved upon his memorial stone. Cannot the kingdom of salvation take me home? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's partly because that was one of his. I think that's one of his favorite songs that the band ever did, and it's kind of their. Ever since his passing, when they played in concert, they kind of do a tribute to him. Like this is for Cliff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe when we post this issue, we could do that. Put Metallica's Ryan with it.
I think that'd be a cool idea.
As a fitting tribute to Cliff, man.
Yeah, I think that'd be a cool idea. And like we're talking about 34 years ago, the guy. I mean, Cliff Burton was 24 when he died. So the other guys couldn't have been much older than that. They're all about the same. Same age. And it is kind of interesting. Cliff just was on those 3 albums, and at the young age of 24 when he died, he just left such a legacy. I remember, and then let's get back to the Master Puppets tour, because he died during that tour, and then they had to kind of regroup and decide, what were they going to do, and I think they had a tour of Japan or something, like a month later, and then in between that time they had to find a new bass player, and I guess their man was eventually Jason Newsted, but I heard one guy that auditioned also at the time didn't get it. Obviously, was Les Claypool from Primus. Could you imagine if he'd gone in Metallica?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, not taking anything away from Les Claypool, because he's a phenomenal bass player.
Oh yeah.
I just couldn't imagine that chemistry working.
I mean, he would have brought something definitely different to the picture, but I mean, and then again, being that you come from Primus, which is kind of your band. You got to fit in with these other 3 guys that just lost, one of their best friends. You got to try to fill his shoes, and then Les Claypool, he's used to kind of being the main guy in the band. James Hetfield wouldn't kind of go, no, you're the bass player. That's where you
probably.
That's where you.
But you know what? That might not have stuck with Cliff.
Yeah.
Because something else, I don't know if people realize or not. Cliff liked to carry a hammer around with him everywhere he went, and he would usually take that hammer out of his luggage and start destroying and trashing dressing rooms. And that's how they came up with the artwork for Kill 'Em All. That was Cliff's idea.
Oh wow!
He wanted a bloody hammer to be on the cover.
Yeah, and then I heard a lot of people say that he had a great sense of humor. He's always telling jokes and making people laugh.
Yeah, he sounded like a guy that was just full of life, man.
Yeah, in fact, you talk about those big 4 bands. You got Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Metallica. And of course, I would say that the main 2 of those got to be Megadeth and Metallica. And they got that connection, obviously, because Dave Mustaine was in both bands. But I heard even Scott Ian from Anthrax over the years talk about what a great guy Cliff Burton was and how cool he thought he was.
Right.
And I heard them talk about when they would be in the same studio, recording different albums and stuff, and they'd run into each other. This is Anthrax and Metallica, in their real early days.
Right, but going back to the speculation that we talked about, as far as if Cliff continued on with the band, if he had lived, just to give you an idea of the kind of person that he was and how he felt, how passionate he was about the metal movement, during those days. For the Kill 'Em All record, they originally wanted to call that Metal Up Your Ass.
Oh, yeah.
And they commissioned an artist, Stephen Gorman, to design a cover. And their manager, Johnny Zazula, nixed the idea. And Cliff was very angry about it, went on a huge anti-industry rant. And the last 3 words out of his mouth just happened to be Kill 'Em All, which Lars and the rest of the band thought that's the perfect title for the new album.
yeah, and and I'll tell you a funny story, not having to do anything really with Cliff Burton, but Metallica. I'd heard James Hetfield in an interview years ago saying that when he first met Lars, he didn't get with him and hook up with him because he was the most talented drummer. He said when I met him, he had just a bass drum and he could barely play. He obviously became better over the years, but he said I got with that guy because I knew he had connections. The first thing they ever did was on, I forget what the song was, but it was on this metal compilation on Metal Blade called Metal Masker. And he says, Lars was friends with the guy that owned the label. And he's like, okay, my little greed to kind of want to get ahead in the music business, he's not the greatest drummer, but I'm going to hook up with him because he's got a connection. Some guy that, owns a record deal. We're going to, or a record company. We're going to see what we can do with that.
Right.
And then, and I've also...
It worked out pretty good for him. They did all right.
Yeah, and I've also heard them say that Cliff Burton was kind of the brains in Metallica at that time. He was almost kind of he helped with a lot of the business management, and he made a lot of the decisions, or he convinced the guys like what he wanted to do in a sense, because if you think about it, like as we know, Metallica didn't do any like music videos until after he died, until the Black Album, obviously. And you would think most bands, like, okay, they were really starting to break out with Master of Puppets. They were on that big Ozzy tour. MTV was really big at the time, and you'd think they would have done a music video. Now maybe, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, maybe Cliff Burton told him, no, we don't do that, because Metallica had this thing for several years where they were so proud of the fact that they made it kind of on their own without radio or a lot of or any kind of MTV support, or because they got some of their stuff on the radio, but not like they do today, and that was something they were really proud of. And it wasn't until after Cliff Burton died, okay, the first music video they ever did, if you remember, was off of And Justice for All. And even then,
I remember that being a huge deal. I do remember that.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, Metallica made a video.
And they had like a special premiere, like, a special premiere. Tune in at this time, 8 o'clock. And it was so different from it was black and white. And I forget, it was based on some movie or something. I forget what it was now. But, and then I was surprised because that was such a big hit. And even as successful as that video did, they didn't make another video until the following album, which was the Black Album. And I think at that point they really couldn't refuse to make any more music. I guess they could have, but they kind of seen the writing on the wall when that album really, we're talking about the Black Album now, started to kind of sell everywhere and selling out and breaking out everywhere.
Sure.
And then you kind of go the other way.
A taste of the good life.
But I remember when even before the world premiere of the one video, the closest thing us Metallica fans ever got to seeing any kind of Metallica video was they put out this live video. I don't know, it was a home video. You remember when they had those, Joe, on VHS? It was called Cliff Them All, and they released it after Cliff's death, I think, during the And Justice for All tour. They came out with this home video. It was like Cliff had just died, and we're giving something, I guess, special to the fans. It's like old clips from when they were playing in the clubs, and that was the only video we had of Metallica at that time.
Right.
And I don't know if that's even that might be out of print now. But if you have that Cliff Them All video, I don't know if it was ever released on DVD. But if you have that, I'm sure it's a real collector's item.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sure it is.
Because like we're saying, Cliff Burton, he did three tours of the band, 3 albums. And I don't know,
the 3 best albums.
Yeah, and I don't know if, they had a lot of video footage from back in those days, video cameras being what they used to be,
Sure, yeah. Yep, that's, it's a shame that it happened the way that it did and when it did. Like I said, the band was actually just starting to enjoy some real success on a larger scale. They had just signed with Elektra Records and was on a big, massive tour, which I believe was their first international tour. And so they were just developing into the monster band that they are, and everybody knows them as today.
Yeah,
Cliff laid the groundwork for that to happen with them.
And you just think about that transition because. Come September, they were on that big Ozzy tour. They were the opening band, and so September 27th, and that horrible accident happens, and Cliff is killed, and then they take about a month off, and only a month, I say, because like I said, first of all, in that month's time, they had to they had to start auditioning people, do a cattle call, whatever they did. They found their man, and Jason Newsted, and then within a month they went from being an opening band on Ozzy's Ultimate Sin tour to within a month they were headlining, and lucky for them, people liked what the band was about, and they were selling out everywhere they went. But it was that one Ozzy tour that kind of put them on the map.
Absolutely, yeah. That was huge, going on the road with a guy like Ozzy. That's, especially back in them days, that meant you were on the map. Literally, that was the beginning of your career as a professional musician, for sure.
Yeah, and then you kind of wonder, like, if Cliff Burton had lived, would he have remained in Metallica? Or if you're to believe what a huge talent the guy was, would he have maybe joined Dave Mustaine and Megadeth? Would he maybe formed his own band? We just don't know.
Right, yeah. Megadeth could have ended up being Dave Mustaine and Cliff Burton and
who knows?
The other guys, who knows, right?
Yeah, and then I also wonder if Cliff had met Jason Newsted, what he would have thought of him, or if they would have been friends, because Jason was very influenced by Cliff Burton. I've heard him talk several times over the years, and he says that was the guy for me. And lo and behold, I got chosen for his spot.
Right. Yeah, it just gives me the chills even hearing that. It's pretty cool.
I mean, just kind of put yourself in those shoes for a minute, Joe. I mean, can you imagine, being a fan of Metallica growing up, and this is one of your major influences, a bass player, and sadly he's killed, and you kind of, so you go from being like a fanboy to stepping up on stage with the, surviving members of the band and actually getting to know them and be their friends and all that. I mean, you're living the dream in a way, and it's sad because, your dream come true is only happening because, another guy, died in a horrible bus accident.
Right, yeah, and again, it's kind of bittersweet, I would have to assume, for those guys. I've never been in that position, but, same thing for Tim Owens, I mean, he was a huge Rob Halford fan and Judas Priest fan before he was ever in Judas Priest. And then here he is, one day he's singing Judas Priest songs in a bar and in his cover band, and then, the next day he's in Judas Priest and he's going around the world as Judas Priest's new lead singer. Those are huge shoes to fill, and no matter what you do, you're kind of living in that other person's shadow. So I assume with Metallica, it had to kind of be the same thing for Jason Newsted coming in, even though he had a lot of respect and admiration and everything else for Cliff, and he loved Metallica's music, obviously, or he wouldn't have done it. And then now all of a sudden he's in the band, and he's got to fill these huge shoes. It's almost kind of unfair, really, because no matter what you do,
you can't win.
You're still gonna be compared to that other individual, no matter what.
Yeah, the only difference I would say in Tim Owens' case is, he's filling in for Rob Halford. He's filling those shoes left by the original singer, but he's not filling in for a dead guy, if you know what I mean. And
right.
I think that's the only difference. And I will say, I think that's a huge reason why a lot of the Metallica fans accepted Jason Newsted in that role, because they
had to get a replacement, either that or quit.
That's what I mean. At that point, you've come this far. You had your breakthrough album of Master of Puppets. The bass player is killed. Now, at that point, you can either pull a Led Zeppelin and say, okay, we're not going to carry on because we don't, we feel he was such a huge presence that nobody can, take his place. Which I think, like in Led Zeppelin's case, I mean, who else besides the son of your late drummer are you going to get to fill his shoes? I mean, that'd be kind of hard. And so I think that's part of the reason, So if you're Metallica, it makes sense for other guys. Well, we're still young. We still want to kind of carry on with what we're, doing. And I think they did an honorary job of, paying tribute to the guy. As far, over these years, they never forgot him. From time to time, you still hear from all these years later, continue to talk about the guy. So I have no problem with the fact that Metallica decided to carry on,
Oh, I'm glad they did. There's stuff beyond that it's hit and miss for me. But there's songs and stuff that they've done that I thought were really kick-ass and promising, and I still love Injustice for All. Even though to me it lacks the presence of bass pretty much altogether. But they're still a great band. They're still a talented band, and I still love them. But I mean, hands down, my favorite stuff, just like you were saying, it's Master of Puppets and Kill 'Em All. Those two records, to me, I don't think Metallica will ever top that. Yeah,
well, I'll tell you, there's obviously to me, there's three different eras. There's obviously the Cliff Burton era that we're talking about tonight. Then there's the Jason Newsted era, and then there's the Rob Chiaro era. Which, nothing against him, he's a great bass player. But I will be honest, okay. My favorite eras would have to be the Cliff Burton era we're talking about, and the Jason Newsted era. And I'll tell you why, because like I said, when Metallica came on my radar, it was when they got the opening gig on that Aussie tour in '86, and then of course, sadly Cliff died, and they carried on. And I was a fan of it, of all the stuff they pretty much did with Jason Newsted, just because that was my time really when I was really starting to get into the band, continuing to follow them, if you will, and I liked a lot of the music they made when Jason was in the band. I don't know why. Haven't been a fan of the last few. I mean, they had that Saint Anger album. Okay, it's a decent enough album, but I mean, and nothing against Bob Rock, but I think okay, if you could replace somebody like Cliff Burton within a month, why do you get the producer to play the bass parts? Instead of getting a permanent member, that was just kind of my thing. And I haven't been a huge fan of the albums they've done. Now I thought the last one they put out was a fairly decent one, more like an old school Metallica album.
The Hardwired album. Destruct.
Yeah. And what I dug about that, talking about the music videos, is I remember the day that came out, they did a kind of a unique thing where they released I forget how many. I think there's 10 tracks on there or something like that. But but first day that came out, starting the night before, they had a video for each one of the tracks, and they would release premiere each of these videos once every hour until every one of them premiered, and that's kind of a cool thing to do. I'll have a video for every single track. Okay, that's a little different. Okay. So I do think the last album was probably the best thing they've done, in years. But getting back to what you're saying about And Justice for All, I can't help but think that was a thing they did on purpose. I don't know why you turn down the bass so low, especially when you just this is a new guy in the band. Why you would kind of do that? I just don't know. And I heard that that's one of the things that was really under Jason Newsted's crawl all these years. It really bothered him,
Well, sure, being a bass player, how could it not bother you?
Yeah. And,
right, it was kind of unfair for him. His first chance to make a thumbprint with the band, as the new Metallica bass player, and you can't even hear anything he's playing.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jason, he's happy with his Metallica legacy as far as, but just think of. He lived a life in the sense that I heard part of the reason he doesn't perform so much anymore is because if you look at all those all that way he moved his body on stage, all that head banging and stuff he did, I mean it just wrecked his body. He had neck problems, back problems for years, and it affected the guy, but he doesn't. He's comfortable. He doesn't need to. He's made his fortune, as they say. He doesn't need to do it if he doesn't want to or he's unable to. But it also amazed me because when he put out that Newsted album, I mean, it sold a ton, and it just and everybody loved what he was doing. He was doing the lead vocals. He was doing the bass. He had a great. Yeah,
I dug it. It was good.
He had a great band,
I thought it had promise to it. Absolutely.
And then he was doing these big festivals, but he said the problem was that he was, it was costing him a lot of money to put this stuff out because he was using his own money to do this stuff, and he said, as great as the shows were and everything, it was just costing me. That's why he had to shut the band down,
Yeah, that's the sad reality of the changing times, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying also about that Hardwired to Self-Destruct album. When I first heard that, the first track I heard was Hardwired, and I got excited, man. I thought to myself, Metallica still got some bullets in the gun.
And I even like
this is the Metallica I remember. I'm like, okay, this is promising, man.
Yeah.
This might be really good.
Yeah.
Sadly, it was just
fluke.
A single track that happened to be really good, and the rest of the album, hit or miss for me. But that track, when I first heard it, I thought, man, Metallica's making a comeback.
I even thought the album cover was kind of going back to old school Metallica.
Right.
Yeah, and I also wonder what Cliff Burton would have thought of that album they did with the late great Lou Reed, Lulu. Nothing, against that, but it was so different from what Metallica is known for.
So as far Load you're talking about?
No, there was an album. I don't know if you'd even really consider it a Metallica album, but Metallica played on this album with Lou Reed, of all people.
Oh, okay.
They actually, I think it was a Lou Reed album, but they called it Lulu, and Metallica was his backing band, but it wasn't too popular with the Metallica fans. I guess they did it because they wanted to play with Lou Reed. He was one of their heroes growing up.
It must not have been, because I have never heard of it.
Well, you should later.
I'll have to check that out.
Look it up, or at least type in Metallica Lulu, and I'm sure you find like articles where people aren't too favorable of it. But it was one of the low points for a lot of.
It sounds like something that I was blessed to be missing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Jason Newsted, and like I said, I think he's probably happy that he joined Metallica. Because, he's able to have a good life and live comfortably.
Yeah, and a future from it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But then you go back to like, which you and I discussed in a previous episode. We were talking about Flotsam and Jetsam, okay? And it's kind of interesting because he wrote a lot of those Flotsam and Jetsam songs, in the band early on, and he was such a focal point of Flotsam and Jetsam, and and then and he was a very talented songwriter, but James and Lars, they wanted that control. They would not ever allow him to ever contribute to the songwriting, and I think that's one of the main things that led him to leave the band, because he felt he was being too much held back.
Right. Yeah. I can't blame him for that. But all in all, it would be interesting to see what would have unfolded if Cliff Burton had stuck around for a few more albums, or to see how Cliff would have rode the tides of all of the changes in the music world. Would he even be still playing music? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it's just so interesting. But I thought he was an interesting character. We 34 years after a man's death, it's only right to kind of look back and
pay tribute to him, pay respect to him. Yeah, I mean, God bless.
I want to thank you, Joe, for
awesome.
Doing this once again. Is there anything else you'd like to say to all the people out there before we wrap this up for tonight?
Yep, cliff them all.
There you go. So, Joe, thanks so much, and people go to www.chaoticrest.com. You can check out the new Scream Kings song Joe was telling you about, and if you want to contribute to his fundraiser, we told you how you can do that. You want to give them one more reminder about that, Joe?
Yeah. My daughter's name is Serena Felty, and it's on GoFundMe. It's on my Facebook pages, and you can see it in the Dragon Lore fan page, Scream King fan page. I'm getting it kind of circulated out there, and anything anybody's willing to do is greatly appreciated. And thank you, and God bless you, man.
And this is Metal, and we'll see you on the next episode, folks. Thanks once again, Joe Lawson. It's been great talking to you as always. Bye-bye, my friend.
Thank you. Take care.